The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
For those of you who've joined in early, the session is about to begin in a few minutes. You can make yourself comfortable, grab a notepad. We are going to have an interesting session today and it's going to start in a few minutes. Meanwhile, I'm going to ask you for a quick little favor. This is the usual sound check. If you can hear me loud and clear. Oh, great. Already I've started receiving responses. Yes, I'm loud and clear. I hope my screen is visible too. Yes, loud and clear and screen visible. Okay. We're all set and we will be starting in a few minutes. Hi all, a very good afternoon. Thank you for having taken the time to join me in today's session. This is Jay, product expert from the AD team of ManageEngine. First things first, so before I get into today's session, for those of you who want to try out the product as I demonstrate today, you can make use of the cloud instance that's hosted in this specific URL which I'll be sharing in a while. It's going to be demo.admanagerplus.com. So for those of you who want to try out the features as I'm explaining today, this is the URL that you should be accessing. And a point that you'll have to note is when you're making use of this specific URL, make sure that you log in as the administrator to make use of all the features, alright? If you're logging in as the technician, there are going to be certain restrictions. So make sure you log in as the administrator into this specific URL that's going to be there on your chat window in 3, 2, 1, and yes. So demo.admanagerplus.com is the URL that you should be accessing, alright? You can make use of this cloud instance and try out the features today. Okay, in case if you have questions coming up regarding the topic that we're discussing today, do not worry at all. Make use of the chat window and shoot them right at me. I'll take the questions right away, as many as possible during the presentation, and maybe if I miss out on one or two, do not worry, I'll take them towards the end of the session and that's a deal. Okay. And we all know that post-lunch sessions are the most exciting ones. That being said, I'm going to try and keep today's session as interesting and exciting as possible. All right. So you can feel free to shoot out your questions. We'll have it as lively as possible. Right. Okay. So things set right. This is going to be the third week in the 5-week workshop series we are organizing for ADManager Plus. Before we start today's session, let me give you a quick recap on what we saw in the first 2 weeks. Yes, we started off our ADManager Plus workshop series with the most fundamental and basic task, which is advanced identity and access provisioning. So what did we do in the first week? We were talking about making use of ADManager Plus to onboard users or provision users in your Active Directory. We saw how the software helps you do a 360-degree provisioning, as in you have users provisioned in your Active Directory, in your Office 365, Exchange, all of it at the same time. So that was about user provisioning or identity and access provisioning. So we made use of two tools. One, the smart templates, and number two, the CSV to get this task done. That was about the first week. The second week was the next phase in the user lifecycle, which was user management. All right. Second week, we were talking about efficient management of AD users. We were also taking a look at Office 365 and Exchange management. So we have finished off the first three phases of a user lifecycle, which is provisioning, management that included modification, and deprovisioning. We've done with that. So the next obvious thing is going to be today's topic, which is reporting. So today's session is going to be about scripting free Active Directory reporting. When it comes to the product, it offers close to 150 plus pre-packaged reports that cover most of your AD reporting scenarios. So you think of a AD reporting scenario, you'll have that report covered. And there's good news. The best part is you don't need to write PowerShell scripts to get these reports generated. It's going to be simple and it's going to be just a few clicks away. And there's more to the reports. Actually, as a matter of fact, you'd not just want to generate reports. Yes, you'd want to make use of the report and perform an action in turn. So that's the idea behind having any report generated. So we've understood that and we've made all of the reports actionable. So what do I mean when I say actionable? Say for example, you generate a report. Right after you generate a report, you have the list of objects right there, right in front of you. So right from the very same console, we let you do management actions that are relevant to that specific object for which a report is generated. So that's the best part. Say for example, you generate a report for inactive users. So the list, with that list right from the very same console, you can perform a management action selecting all of the inactive users, maybe deleting them, deprovisioning them. So that's the idea behind AD reports. So we have 150 plus pre-packaged reports, and in today's session I've taken 10 top reports or 10 use cases and 10 corresponding reports for discussion. All right, so that's as regards to AD reporting. Then the second half of today's session is going to have something that's pretty interesting, which is access administration. So we're going to talk about access administration, and this is going to happen via group membership. Yes. And finally, we'll conclude today's session with something critical, which is file server permission management. So we're going to see how to generate reports for file server permissions and then in turn carry out a management task right from the result of that specific report that we generated. Okay. Okay. Yes, so the topics for today's session. Okay, so today's session, like I told you, is going to be about reporting, all in all about reporting. We are going to start off with a case for logon permissions, all right? You as the administrator or anybody for that matter across organizations, they'd have this one specific requirement, right? Ensuring that the right set of users have access to critical domain controllers or file servers. That's a fundamental requirement that any administrator would want to ensure. So we will be talking about figuring out inappropriate users having permissions to critical machines like domain controllers and file servers, and eventually see how to remove access to those top level DCs and file servers. So inappropriate permissions are going to be removed. So that's the first report and first task that we'll be performing. The next one, we'll go further and talk about something as critical as a brute force attack. So right after a brute force attack, there's a security best practice that you're supposed to follow, which is making sure that across your organization, you reset password for all of your users. And why do you do that? Just to make sure that there's no collateral damage or there's no further impact because of that specific attack. So we will be talking about doing an organizational wide password reset for all of your users in your organization with just a few clicks from a report called as all users report. All right. Yes. Further, we'll proceed talking about custom AD attributes, and when it comes to AD attributes, today we'll be talking about duplication in AD attributes and AD attributes being empty. So two cases for AD attributes. One, your organization has a set of attributes that are not supposed to be duplicated. So we'll have a report for that, and we'll also generate a report for a specific attribute whose value is left empty for an object. So yes, those are the AD attribute reports that we'll be discussing today. Yes. We'll proceed further and again talk about inappropriate or excessive permissions that are vested on users, and something pretty interesting and something that you'll have to handle with care: nested group membership. So we've got a report for that that's going to give you an in-depth view into nested group membership. So we're going to be seeing how the product lets you generate a report that, if otherwise figured out using your native ADUC, is not going to be visible at all. So we're going to be talking about native group membership, or sorry, nested group membership. Yes. And finally, we'll conclude today's session with file server permission management. So we'll generate a report for file server permissions and in turn perform a management action right on top of the report. So that's going to be the agenda for today's session. Let me quickly get into the product and kickstart today's session. Yes, like I told you, this is going to be the demo instance that you'll have to be accessing. And this is going to be my instance. Yes. So we've got the dashboard view that's welcoming you. The dashboard view gives you a quick overview into what's your existing scenario, your organizational scenario when it comes to your Active Directory. Yes. So since today we're going to be talking about reports, the dashboard makes the best sense when it comes to reports. It gives you a quick overview, like I told you. So if you were to generate a report, you'd have to get to the reporting tab and generate a specific report. But instead, if you want to get a quick overview without even having to generate a report, all you'll have to do is just log into the product. From the dashboard, you can take a look at critical data such as your user reports, where you can see the number of users, inactive users, the users who are disabled, locked out, password expired users. So this is the advantage, and these are actionable again. The moment you click on these, it's going to take you to another page or the report from where you can perform the action. Yes. Okay. So the first 2 weeks we were discussing about AD management. All right. And under AD management, we were talking about user provisioning, user modification, and deprovisioning. So like I told you, today's topic is going to be all about Active Directory reporting. Yes. So where do you go to get Active Directory reporting? Right here, AD reports. Okay. So today's session is going to be about AD reporting, and like I told you, the product offers 150 reports in different categories. We've got reports for user objects, we've got reports for group objects, yes, contacts, computers, your group policy reports, and certain critical reports for security, yes, and we also have the NTFS reports. And not just AD reports, we also have provision for Office 365 reports. So it's not just a 360-degree provisioning software where you can create users in your Office 365 or Google Apps. We've also included the provision for reporting in Office 365 and Google Apps. Okay, so let me quickly start off with the 10 use cases for today's demonstration. I'm going to start off with group reports. All right. Okay. So we were talking about logon permissions. Yes, when it comes to critical domain controllers or your file servers, you'd want to ensure that there's no inappropriate access, or you'd not want anybody who's not supposed to have access to have access. And how would you find that? It's going to be difficult if you were to generate one computer at a time, one after the other, right? Instead, what you can do is you can figure out those users who should be having access. So what's the best way to do it? you know a specific group that's got to have access to those computers or your domain controllers or your file servers. Then what you do is you figure out all those users who do not belong to that specific group. So it's a little tricky if you were to use a PowerShell script. Actually, as a matter of fact, it's going to be really, really difficult because you have to find out all those users who are not a part of a group. If it were to be users a part of a group, yes, okay, that's going to be possible. But then the otherwise, it's going to be a little tedious and tricky. That's where we've got the users not in groups report. So ideally, this report is going to help you view the users who are not members of a specific group. Why are we doing this? Because we want to ensure that only a set of users from a specific group, something like the domain admins group, have access to those critical machines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to select the critical group. So it's already pre-selected. Let me get back and show you how. So here we have the list of groups that are available in your environment. What I want to do is I want to figure out all those users who are not a part of the domain admins group. So I'm going to quickly search for that. Yes. So I'm saying just my domain administrators are going to have access to that critical file server or domain controller. So I'm selecting domain admins as my reference group. Yes, I've selected domain admins. The moment I hit generate, what am I going to get? I'm going to get a list of users who are not a part of this specific group. So that's what I intend to do. The moment I hit generate, yes, I'm going to have the list, and from this list I can perform my required action. So yes, like you can see, the membership right here says domain users and it's not going to be domain admins. So all these users who are listed right here are those users who are not members of the domain admins group. So very simply, all I'll have to do is just select all of my users right here. I've selected all the 100. Yes. The next thing that I'll have to do is perform an action. I have my users who are not a part of the domain admins group. The next is an action. And what action do I intend to perform? I want to restrict access to workstations. Yes, so more actions. Select the specific action from the list of actions that are available. Here it's going to be workstations. Yes, so I'm selecting workstations and hitting go. So this is going to give me this console from where I can choose to disallow or remove computers for the users who are selected. Yes, so I'm going to say allow and I'm going to say remove computers. So the next step is to select the computers or select the workstations for which I want to remove access. So here it's going to be something as critical as a domain controller. Yes, I've got a domain controller here. And then what more? Let me say this and this as well. Is there something more? Okay, those are workstations, user workstations. I'm going to check admin PC as well. So what I'm doing right here is I've come to this specific management action right here that gives me access to restrict permissions to specific workstations or specific domain controllers. I've selected the domain controllers. And right here, I have the list of users who are not domain administrators. So these computers are supposed to be accessed by domain administrators. And this is the list of users who are not domain administrators. What's the next obvious step? I have to go ahead and hit apply. So the moment I hit apply, all these users are going to be stripped of access to these machines, irrespective of the fact that they are a part of whichever group. It's okay as long as they are not a part of the domain admins group. They are going to be removed of access to all of this when I hit apply. So that's going to be the first report for the day, which is users not in groups report. Yes. What's the next task that we're going to handle? Brute force attack, like I told you, it's super critical. The moment right after a brute force attack, you're supposed to act right away, be vigilant and be agile, and start with an organizational wide password reset. So how do you do it? Pretty simple. We're talking about an organization wide password reset, and for that we'll have to get into the reports tab. Yes, It's going to be a user report because I want to have a list of all the users in my organization. Yes, so it's going to be my all users report. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate for this specific domain that I have, and this is going to give me a list of all the users in my organization. Yes, so there are 46 users in my organization. I'm going to quickly select all of them. So now my organization has faced a brute force attack. All right. So I'm trying to contain the impact by doing an organizational wide password reset. So I've selected all my users. Yes. So I have to check all my users. It's asking me if I want to select all the 156 objects. Yes, indeed, I want to do that. Clicking on OK. And the next action that I want to do is do a password reset. So in the last case, we did a workstation action. Here we are trying to do a password reset action, which is the first action that's listed. Yes. So I've generated a report for all of my users, selected the reset password action, and I'm going to hit go. Okay, so I'm taken to a screen from where I can reset password in 4 different ways. Yes, I can choose to generate a random password based on a pre-configured password complexity, or I can choose to type a password or set it same as user logon name, which I did not want to do because already my organization has underwent a brute force attack, or leave it blank again, which is something I do not want to do. Now that I'm aware of the intensity of the situation, I'm going to go ahead and create a strong and long password that meets the complexity requirement. So what are we doing right here? We are trying to select all the users in the organization with one report called this all users report. And from that report, we've performed the action of resetting password, and right here is the console from where I have to do that action. So I've got 4 options. I've chosen to type the password manually, meeting the password complexity. And when it comes to the password options, there are certain things that you'll have to remember. You'll have to say that the password has to be changed upon next logon, so that it's not going to be the same password for all users. So the user is going to be prompted with a flag that asks him to change the password right after the logon. So that way all users across your organization are going to change their passwords with no other go. Yes, the moment I hit apply, all of my listed users, all the 146 of them are going to have their passwords reset. Yes. So when it comes to your critical accounts, something like your administrative account, it is important that you ensure that the passwords are reset as per your organizational requirement. Say for example, if you're aware that it's your administrative account that's not underwent the attack, or you know that the administrative account has a specific complexity policy that has to be adhered to, go ahead and you can uncheck the admin account right here and get going with the process. Yes, this is basically a response to a question that was asked by one of the attendees. So as regards to the admin accounts, it's up to you. You can select the admin account and have them reset, but then it's better to have it unchecked and have it reset as per your requirement. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so the moment you hit apply, what's going to happen is the password is going to get reset for all of the users. Yes, so that's how you do an organizational wide password reset as a best practice right after a brute force attack. Okay, so getting back to AD reports. The third task for the day is going to be something that's pertaining to AD attributes. Yes. So when it comes to AD attributes, there may be certain critical AD attributes in your organization that cannot be left empty. Okay. Say for example, let's take an attribute that's as unique as an employee ID. An employee ID can be that identifying attribute that's got to be mandatorily associated with every single employee in your organization. What if it's either left empty or if it's duplicated? So at both of these instances, it's going to be a trouble for the administrator. he's got to take the pain of figuring out whose attribute is left out unfilled. So to manually do it, it's going to be difficult. For that, we've got a report that's called as the users with duplicate attribute reports, and the second report is users with empty attributes. So let's talk about duplication first. So my idea is to figure out those users who have their employee ID set as duplicate. Yes, so two of my users have the same employee ID, which is not supposed to happen at all. Yes, so what I'm doing is under AD reports, I'm choosing users with duplicate attributes. Yes, in your case, you can choose any of the attributes that are available right here. All the 43 of it, you can choose whichever attribute for which you want to find out the duplicate. Okay, so in my case, what I'm going to do is select employee ID. Okay, looking for employee ID. Yes, I've got employee ID right here in the last. So there are 43 attributes that are supported. You can look up for duplicates in any of these 43 attributes. So here, the last time when I generated a report, I generated a report for duplicates in logon name. Again, a logon name has to be unique. It's more like your fingerprint attribute. So in this case, I'm going to choose employee ID and hit OK. Yes, the next thing that I'll have to do is simple, hit generate to have the list of users with duplicates in this specific attribute. Okay, I've got 5 users right here. Who do I have right here? I've got Emma, I've got Ethan Hunt. Okay, so we've got Ethan Hunt having the same employee ID as that of, Emma and Kate. So what do we understand from here? So this is something that's not supposed to happen. What I can do is I can perform the management action, the required management action, which is altering Ethan Hunt's employee ID to the right employee ID. I'm going to say 007. Ethan Hunt employee ID is getting changed because his employee ID is same as that of another user. So I can preview. So this was my existing value and this is going to be my new value. The moment I hit update, it's going to get updated. Alright, so let's see if it's updated. Yes, the employee ID attribute has been updated. Likewise, I've got more users. Let me quickly show you how to modify employee ID. So we've generated a report for a specific attribute, duplicates in specific attributes. Here it's the employee ID attribute. Alright, so I've got the list of users with the same employee ID. Okay, let me say Megan and Mark have the same employee ID. So let me quickly change Megan's employee ID. Let's say 696 and update. Okay, so one more user and we'll be done. So Kate has to have a different employee ID. Let's say 789 and hit update. Okay, so the moment I regenerate this specific report, what would I see? Let's see. What I've done is I've changed the employee IDs. I've made them unique. So it says there is no matching data for your input, which means there are no users in my organization with the employee ID attribute that's duplicated. So we're done with the task of finding out AD users with a specific attributes value being duplicated, and we also effectively got that removed right from the very same reporting console. Yes? Okay, what's the next task? Again, another AD report for users for empty attributes. Okay, let me take the same example of employee ID. Okay, that's going to be employee ID. Yes. So I'm removing off my existing attribute. So the attribute that I want to find out with no value, or the attribute that has empty is empty, is going to be the employee ID. Yes, I'm going to hit save. So the moment I hit generate with this option selected, I'm going to have a list of users whose employee ID attribute is left empty. So I've got 9 users in my organization of the 145 users whose employee ID is left empty. Yes, so these are the 9 users. So very simply, with just one click, selecting the attribute and hitting generate, I have the list of users with a specific attribute that's left empty. So this way I can choose from the list of available attributes. It can be anything of the list that's available right here. Say for example something like the email address. If that's left empty, that can be figured out as well. So let me add that to the list as well. So now I have two attributes. One is the employee ID and number 2 is the email ID. Yes, I'm going to hit save. So I have two attributes. So at a time, I can run a report just for a single attribute, all right, and say match any of the selected criteria or match all of the selected criteria. Or I can add multiple attributes and figure out if I want to match all of the selected attributes or match any of the selected attributes. Yes, when I say match all of the selected attributes, I'm going to have a list of users who have both employee ID and email address left out empty. Okay, so from the list here, what do we see? This one was the list for the report that I generated before, which was just employee ID. So these 9 users do not have their employee IDs filled out. Okay, and there are two users right here. One is Dan Brown and number 2 is Ray William, who also do not have their email address filled out. So the moment I hit generate for this specific condition that I altered to employee ID and email address, I'm supposed to have just the two users, Dan Brown and Ray William. Let's hit generate and see what happens. Okay, like I told you, we just have the two users, Dan Brown and Ray William, with both of their attributes, both employee ID and email address, left empty. So what I can do is, again, I can click on the user, Dan Brown, choose to fill out his empty attribute, which is the employee ID 5657 and the email address dan at davincicode.com, something like that. I can fill that out and hit update. So what's going to happen when I hit generate? Dan's gone. Yes? Okay, so that's how you generate a report for empty attributes and make the modification right from the very same report. Fill out that empty attribute and get done with your job. Okay, so we're done with reports for user attributes, AD user attributes, two reports, users with duplicate attributes and users with empty attributes. We're done with that. The first report that we saw was users not in group report, which was a group report. What's the next report that we're going to talk about? We're going to talk about something that's critical, which is the password report. So we've got a list of reports right here. I'm going to discuss two critical reports for passwords. One is password unchanged users, okay? And number 2 is going to be users with password set as never expire. So both of these cases are more like a security vulnerability. You cannot have users who've not changed passwords for a long period of time. Likewise, you can also not have users who have passwords set as never expire. So these are two critical use cases or scenarios that you'll have to avoid no matter what. So let's start off with users with password unchanged. Okay, so I've got an option to select my desired time frame. So if I select 1 month, or let me say something that's longer than that, say 150 days, I can choose n days and say 150. So I can select the time frame of password being not changed. All right, I've selected my required domain, I've set the time frame and I'm hitting generate. So this is going to give me a list of users who've not changed their password in the last 150 days. So I've got 33 users in my organization, which is not good at all. So ideally, it's good to have passwords changed once in a month as a best practice, once in 2 months at the max. So the sooner or the more frequent, the better, because we do not want your security to be compromised. Yes, what do we see right here? We've got users right here, and unfortunately we've got an administrator account as well who's not changed his password for the last 150 days. Your end user accounts, okay, that's to an extent understandable, but then when it comes to your administrator account, not understandable or not acceptable at all. So you have to make sure that your admin accounts have their password reset once in a while, frequently. Yes, so what you'll have to do is select all of the users, all the 33 of them, okay, and choose to either hit this, which is change password upon next logon. So the moment I hit this, all of my users right here are going to get prompted to change their password and they cannot bypass this. Okay, that's one way to do it. Or like the previous way where I showed you how to reset password for users, yes, you can select the action of resetting the password. So what are we doing right here? We are talking about users who not change their password in the last 150 days, which is bad. So what I'm doing is I'm generating a report to find out all those users, yes, all those naughty users, select all of those users, and on, since I'm the administrator, since I have the permission, I'm going to hit change password upon next logon, which is going to enforce them to change their passwords right after they try to log on the next time. Yes. So this way you can prevent a security threat, you can prevent a security vulnerability of users not changing their passwords frequently. Okay, so that's a password report we discussed. The next password report that I'll want to discuss is users with password never expires. This at least to an extent is fine, but then if your password is set to never expire, that is all. That's going to be a even more critical issue. Let me show you how. So this is the users with password never expire. This specific domain, I'm hitting generate. Let's pray that there are minimum, oh my goodness, there are 38 users in this specific instance who have their password set to never expire. So the password expiry date is never expires and password status is also the same. So what's going to happen is these users are going to have their password reset from the administrator side. So you can have all of the users selected, perform the action of reset again. Yes, let me quickly show you so that you understand how to do this. We've already done this, but then just a recap, hit reset and hit go. So you're going to be taken to this module from where you can say choose to type a password. All right, you can say the user must change password upon next logon and change this critical attribute, which is user password never expires, to no. So we are trying to stop all those 38 users whose password is set to never expire, yes, and we are changing it to no. So we are setting an expiry to it and hitting apply. Okay. So we're done with the next task for password as well. So I'm halfway through today's session. I'll go ahead and give you a quick recap. We started off with a group report, the group report for users not in groups. This was for restricting logon permissions just to the admin group. We figured out list of users who were not a part of the admin group and we removed access. The next thing that we were discussing was user AD attribute report. We were talking about empty attributes and duplicate attributes. We figured out users with duplicates, removed them. We figured out users with empty attributes, filled in those attributes. Done. And the next report that we were discussing was a critical report, which was a password report. So we were talking about password unchanged users and users with password never expire. So we figured out both of the users, both the category of users, and have their passwords reset. Okay, what's going to be the next case? So the next one is as critical as passwords, or as critical as a security vulnerability as passwords not being reset. The next one is going to be a user report, which is going to be the inactive users report. So inactivity again is a critical thing. If users are left inactive for a long time, say for example somebody has left your organization and the account has been inactive for quite some time. So that can be a security loophole with which the user who's left can get back If he's rogue, you never know, he can compromise your organization's data. Something of that sort should not happen. So to stop that, we've got the inactive users report. Clicking on the inactive user report, self-explanatory reports, pretty simple. Click on a report. The report is self-explanatory. So here it's inactivity. So I can go ahead and specify the time frame of inactivity. So what's going to be my time frame? So let's say 150 days. For the last 5 months, selecting end days, choosing 150. So this is going to give me a list of users who've been inactive in my organization for the last 150 days, who've not logged in for the last 150 days. So these many users, so since this is a test domain, I have multiple users. In your organization, if it's live, you're going to have a little less than this. Yes. So what you can do is right after you have your inactivity period selected, the moment you hit generate, you're going to get all those users who've been inactive for the last 150 days. So you can either choose to delete them, selecting all of them, and hit delete when you're very sure that you no longer want them in your environment, or you can choose to disable them. We've got the button put right here. You can disable them, or otherwise if you want to quarantine them before you actually perform anything on them, you want to quarantine them, you can do that as well. You can move them to a specific container. You might have an OU in your organization that's called the quarantine OU, right? You can move them to that, or like always choose to perform an action on top of them. So it's up to you. If it's going to be 150 days, more or less, in most of the scenarios it's going to be deletion, or you can also choose to disable or move them to a specific quarantined OU. Yes. There are two more options in this specific inactive users report. One is users excluding those who have never logged on. So when I click exclude those users who are never logged on, the report immediately gets altered to 28. From being 91, it's become 28. So these are the users who have logged on once, all right, but then have been inactive for the last 150 days. Yes, so when I hit exclude disabled users, it's going to get all the more smaller. It's become 22. So I can have both of these checkboxes selected and I can generate a report for inactivity. Yes. Okay. Another AD report done. So we have completed 7 AD reports till now. Yes. The next 3 are going to be, okay, we've completed 8 reports till now. The next one is going to be a critical report again, a report that's pertaining to group membership. Okay. The first report that we saw today was for users who are not in a specific group. All right. The next report that we're going to talk about is again a group membership report, but then this time it's a report that's a little tricky. Okay. When it comes to nested group membership, a group report called as the nested group membership report, you can find it either under the group reports, or you can go to the users report and say nested reports. Yes, groups for users is the report that we'll be discussing right now. So to give you more clarity, or to give you an analogy, nested group membership is more or less like Leonardo DiCaprio in the Inception movie, inside a dream, inside a dream. Likewise, the nested group membership is something like a group inside a group inside a group. Okay, if you were to use your native Active Directory to find out group membership, it's going to be on a superficial or on a superficial level. It's not going to give you an in-depth picture as to what's the actual group membership. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to switch to my Active Directory. Yes, and look up for a specific user. One quick moment. Okay, something wrong with my AD. I've taken a remote right here. Just one quick moment. Okay, yes. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to look up for a specific user. Okay, this user goes by the name nested, because this is the test user that I've created a while back with nested group membership to explain the use case, right? So I'm going to search for nested. I've got the nested user. I'm going to go ahead and check for his group membership right now. Looking up for his group membership. So what do I see right here? So my user called the nested user is a part of two groups. One is the domain users group and number two is the nested group. So ideally he's a part of just two groups. So that will be your understanding if you were to use your native Active Directory AD users and computers console. So if you were to leave at this, okay, not a problem, you never know. You'll just stop right here, okay? But then what if I tell you that this specific user had access to administrative privileges? You wouldn't believe that, because this is just the two groups to which he's got access to, and there's no admin group that's related to it. So you're going to say that it's totally not going to be possible. But then the truth is altogether different. Just give me a minute and I'm going to show you what's the truth. So let me quickly get to groups for users. So this is going to give me the nested group membership. Groups for users under AD reports, under users report, groups for users report. I'm going to quickly go ahead and select my technician. From this specific domain, I'm going to select, yes, I've got my nested user. So this is the very same user that I showed you right here. Yes, the same user, okay, for who the group membership was just restricted to these two groups. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly hit generate. Much to our surprise, this specific user called the nested user has group membership into 8 groups. Not just the domain users group and the nested groups that we saw there, but then to other groups as well. Things as critical as the administrator group, things as critical as the DNS admin, schema admin and the enterprise admin. How did this happen? Very simple. If you were to use the ADUC, you will just have access to the superficial, just the top level group details or group membership details. But then this specific nested group membership or groups for users reports is a recursive report. It gets into a group and figures out if that specific group in turn is a part of another group. The reason behind this happening right here is the nested group of which nested user was a part of has group membership linked to DNS admin, domain admin, enterprise, schema and the administrators group. So this is the reason behind why this specific user has access to these critical groups, and you might actually miss out not noticing that he's got a critical access like this, because the native is just giving you a fundamental or a top level view with just two groups. So you are in the verge of facing a possible security threat from this specific user, because he's got access to all these groups for which he is not supposed to have access to. Yes, so what I'll have to do is I can quickly check those groups to which I'll want to remove access, all the critical administrative groups. Okay, the most important thing is to remove this specific group membership as well. Selecting all of that, just leaving domain users. From the actions tab, yes, you know how to get the group memberships removed. Pretty simple, straightforward. Get the action tab and have your management action performed. It can be any management action that you want to perform. So it's that simple. So you generate a simple report called as the group for user report from the AD reports tab, user reports, group for users report. So this is going to give you a clear-cut picture as to your group membership, right? No fancy stuff. It's straightforward. It's a recursive methodology with which the group membership is figured out. One group at a time, it gets inside, figures out what's the iterative group membership and gives you a clear picture as to what's the group membership, and not like a fundamental or a top level picture. Yes, so that way you can ensure security. Okay, so we've got one more report, a critical report, as critical as your group membership or your nested group membership, which is file server permission management. So we're talking about AD reports, and it's going to be NTFS report that we're going to be discussing, file server permission management under permissions for folder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate a report for permissions that are granted to a specific critical folder. Say for example, I am an organization that's got critical financial data. All right, so if that data is compromised because I unknowingly gave access to wrong set of users, that's going to be a big challenge that I'll have to counter. So we've got the permissions for folders report that's going to give you a clear-cut picture into who have access to a specific confidential folder. Yes, let me quickly select. So we are selecting the folder for which I'll want to figure out the permissions that are granted, or the list of users who have permission for a critical folder. Let me say I have a folder called as confidential. So this is going to be my reference folder. So confidential folder has critical data that's not supposed to be shared with people other than the administrators or people from a specific top level executive group. So let me see if it's the case. So this should have just been shared with those users who are top level admins. Let's see if that's the case. Selecting the group, and I can also choose the level to which the search has to happen. It can be the parent level or it can be all folder level. Yes, I'm going to quickly hit generate. So we are talking about permissions for folders report. We have selected a confidential share folder and we've hit generate to get the list of users who have access to this specific file of this specific folder. Here the administrators have access. That's perfectly fine. But then there are two other users who were not supposed to have access. So this wasn't intentional. So somewhere down the line, these guys have got access. Darth and John have got access to this specific confidential share, and that's been forgotten, long forgotten. Nobody knew that it was given, access was given, and it's been forgotten. So we generated a report that gives us a clear picture as to who's been given access, and not just that, you can also take a look at to what level of permission the access is given. So we've got full control right here. So this means Darth will be able to perform any action that he wishes to perform on this specific critical folder. He can choose to delete, he can choose to alter any of the data right there, modify, do any task, because he's given full control. This is something that's not supposed to happen. Yes, so we've got the AD reports, we've got the permissions for folders report. For this specific confidential share, I've got the list of users who have access, and I also figured out there are two users who are not supposed to have permission. So what's the next obvious step? I'll have to remove the permission. And how do I do that? It's going to be a management task that we are going to be doing. So I'm going to get to AD management task. Yes, and it's going to be a file server management task. And what do I intend to do? I intend to remove or modify NTFS permission. So I can choose to either modify or remove. Let me quickly hit modify. Again, I'll have to select the specific folder. Here it's going to be under my DC, and it's going to be my confidential folder for which I want to remove access, inappropriate access. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to select the list of accounts for who permission has to be granted. So I'm going to say my administrators need access or should be given access. I can either choose a specific user right here, look up for an administrative user if I know which users in specific, say for example the IT admin user or the super admin, or instead select a group, which is going to be the case in most of the scenarios. I'm going to say domain admins. So my domain admins, that specific group is going to have access to the confidential folder. And I can also choose to restrict the condition. I can say full control because it's the domain admins. Yes, I can either specifically go still further. If I have a end user selected, say for example a single user selected there, I can choose the permission or level of permission that I want to grant. Yes, I have to choose allow. If I want to specifically deny permission for somebody, I can say Dart was the person who had permission. So looking up for Dart, selecting Dart, hitting OK, and I'm denying permission. So what I've done is I'm just granting the admin's permission and I'm removing Dart of his permission. Yes, so Darth Vader can no longer cause trouble. So I'm denying him permission. Okay, this is one way to do it, but then there's a best practice that's going to help you resolve this issue in all the more efficient way, which is I can say removing all existing permissions. So this way I'm going to make sure that all of the existing permissions, irrespective of what's the existing permission, I had administrative accounts as well there in the in the report that I generated. So as a best practice, I'm removing all of it. I'm wiping the slate clean, and then I'm saying remove all permissions and apply only the above permissions. So that way I'm wiping off my slate completely clean and just giving permission to my domain admins. So if I were to select this, I can remove this. Yes, so now I've wiped the clates clean. Nobody's got access but for just the group that's listed right here. And the moment I hit modify, that's going to get applied. Yes, and we successfully modified the file server permission. Alright, so we have come to an end of today's session. Let me give you a quick recap on what we saw in the second half of the session. We were talking about password reports. We were talking about two password reports. One, password unchanged users, and password never expires users. We saw how to figure out those users and alter their password conditions. We also saw an user report again, which was the inactive users report. All right, we were talking about a critical case, nested group membership from the group for users report. We figured out the nested group membership, yes. And finally, a while back, we were talking about NTFS reports, which was the permissions report. We figured out the list of users who had permission for a specific folder, and from the management tab did a management action of removing those inappropriate permissions. Okay, so the topics for the day discussed. Let me give you a sneak peek into what's coming up next week. So next week is going to be an interesting week. It's going to be about Active Directory delegation. When it comes to doing delegation using your native, yes, delegation can be done, but then the problem is tracking what access you gave to which user and making sure that it's a secure access, restricted access. So that's going to be the biggest challenge that any AD native delegation has. So we are going to be talking about enforcing attribute level restrictions for ensuring a safe Active Directory delegation. We're also going to be talking about Active Directory workflow. Yes, it's a ticket-based execution workflow that we are going to be talking and discussing about next week. All right. So thank you once again for having taken the time today. You'll have a survey form that's coming up towards the end of the session. Fill up the survey form with your suggestions for topics. Yes, feel free to make use of the chat window right now. I'm available to take all your questions. If I missed out one or two questions, I'm going to take them right now. If you have more questions, feel free to ask all of your questions. I'm going to stay there for another 15 minutes, take all your questions, and if in case you want me to demonstrate something, I can do that as well. All right. You can grab a copy of this specific presentation, the presentation deck that's available from the handout section. Okay. So I hope you enjoyed today's session on Active Directory reports. I look forward to see you next week as well. Until next week, this is Jay signing off. See you. Tada, bye-bye. You all have a nice day. Yes, I have questions regarding the presentation deck that's totally available for download. You can download it from the handout section that's there in your go-to webinar console. You can download that. All right. And as regards, I have a question regarding the feedback. Yes, there's going to be a form that's going to come up towards the end of the session right after you close. You can fill out your suggestions for the next week's topic. Yes, you can do that. All right. I have a question regarding nested group membership. All right, it's from Brad. So Brad asks me if I can show more details on NTFS permissions. Okay, 1 minute, Brad. So when it comes to your file server permissions, there are totally four reports that we offer. All right. One is regarding the shares in your server. So you can actually figure out the list of all the shares and the specific corresponding permissions in that specific share. The report that I showed you in today's example, permissions for folder and folders accessible by account. This is an interesting report. You can specify the user and then figure out what accounts or what folders to which he's got access to. So these are other reports for NTFS permissions. When it comes to customizing the dashboard view for your technician, so if that's the question or if that's the case that you're handling, that's going to be a topic that's going to be discussed in the next week. We're talking about AD delegation task. All right. So when you're delegating your roles for your users, say for example, you're creating a help desk role, what you'll have to do is you can choose to specify the list of modules that are going to be accessible for your help desk technician. So that way you give them restricted access to say this specific option is going to be enabled. When it comes to the dashboard, again, you can restrict access to the dashboard from the home tab that's available in the role that you create. So it's going to be a task for the next week. So we're going to be talking about AD delegation next week. This is basically an answer to the question Brandon had regarding the dashboard that's got to be made available to the help desk technician. So that's going to be possible. So next week we'll be talking about that, Brandon. So if you're looking for a report that gives you access to specific shares, again, it's going to be a NTFS report that we're talking about. NTFS reports shares in the server. This specific report is going to answer your question, Connor. If you've got more questions coming up, please feel free to use the chat window. I'm available right now. I've answered all the questions that have come up till now on the chat, and I've taken a few questions in live as well. So if there are more questions, please do make use of the chat window, and I'm going to answer right now. Okay, so that seems like a wrap for today's session. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it. Looking forward to see you next week as well. Thank you once again. See you. Tada. Bye-bye. You all have a great day. Bye-bye.